Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, what do Boris Johnson, Muhammad Ali and more than 500,000 members of the public have in common? Well, they're all united in heaping opprobrium. For Stephen Ant's sake, I should point out that that means they're being critical on the head of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. More than 500,000 people have signed a parliamentary petition calling for him to be banned from entering the UK. It stems from his announcement earlier this week that a Trump presidency would see a ban on all Muslim people entering the US. He was roundly condemned in America, but also by British politicians and other public figures for saying that. And in response, he tweeted, quote, "The United Kingdom is trying hard to disguise their massive Muslim problem. Everybody is wise to what is happening. Very sad. Be honest." But while the majority of people in British public life joined in the condemnation, he had one champion. Yes, the columnist Katie Hopkins, who said, "Don't demonise Trump. He speaks for millions of Americans, and who can blame them for not wanting to end up like us?" And it turns out that Donald, or the Donald as he's known to his fans, is a fan of Katie's. He tweeted, "Thank you to respected columnist Katie Hopkins of the Daily Mail for her powerful writing on the UK's Muslim problems." So there we go. Well, Katie Hopkins is a columnist for the Daily Mail online, and she joins us now from our Plymouth studio. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Now, you supported Donald Trump's words on this, but you also said it was totally impractical to do. So how do you square that?
I think what I was saying was that I support the ideas behind what he's trying to do. You know, ultimately, Donald Trump is trying to show true leadership. The Americans felt very let down by what Obama said some 2 days after 14 people were gunned down. And I think in that kind of vacuum, what you see is Donald Trump stand up and at least say something that sounded like he wanted to protect his nation, protect America. And that's what I stand behind, is we need strong leadership at these times. And I'm actually personally a little tired of your BBC bias, which of course keeps telling us that most people support banning Trump from the UK, whereas actually it's only 500,000 people clicking on a mouse.
When did I say most people are in favour of banning?
Well, you went through a long list, didn't you, of Boris Johnson, people clicking on a petition.
Yeah, but when did I say most
figures.
British people? I have no evidence
well, let's
for
talk
the
about
views
the
of most
people
British people. So let's come back, instead of saying things about me which aren't true, let's come back to what you say.
Let's talk about the people who
so let
do
me ask you this.
what Trump
Hold on,
says.
I asked the question, so let me ask you this. You said that what Mr. Trump said is, quote, a lot of hot air. Why is that showing leadership? How is hot air leadership?
Because sometimes, in times of real difficulty, in times of fear, what you want from your leadership is to say, we are not going to tolerate this. We are going to protect our country. And that's what Donald Trump has done. And actually, if you look around you outside of the bubble that you guys are in, actually, people are fearful. I work with people in London that ring their families on a daily basis to check they're okay. My family aren't that keen on me going to London right now. My friends won't go there. Paris has taken a 50% cut in its tourism trade. I think what we see is there is fear on the streets. We may not want to acknowledge it, and you may want to talk about that petition, but then why don't we talk about the other petition of 400,000 signatures, which people say, let's stop migration while we think about how we're going to protect our country. And one of the things that really annoys me, of course, is our Muslim community do not stand up and separate themselves enough, for my liking, from the very fearful acts of terrorism that are right here on our shores.
But there have been Muslim demonstrations against what's been happening in their name. There have been Muslim leaders who've stood out and talked about it and condemned what they've been doing. You seem to keep on setting a test for them that they have to meet all the time. They're not required to do that, are they?
But why is it then, Andrew, when two families in Luton disappear to ISIS. No one knows anything, not the imam, not the local community, nobody that they hang out with. No one knows nothing. They simply up and vanished.
People
and no
disappear
one
all
says
the time
Why
and they
is
don't know
this?
what's going on. Just speak to the police about that. Your teenagers are disappearing all the
That's just hot air
time.
and froth, Andrew. I think what we see and what we are disappointed by as a British public is a lack of pushback from the Muslim community. What we don't see is people within those communities where we do lose people to ISIS. We don't see them standing up and saying, yes, they were my neighbour. Yes, I'm cross they've gone. Yes, it was a terrible thing.
Okay.
I don't know how they got radicalised, but here might be a reason.
All
and
right.
I don't think we see enough of that, Andrew.
If Mr. Trump got his way and Muslims were banned for a period from entering the United States, how would you enforce it? How would you know who was a Muslim and who wasn't?
I've been very clear on my article on the Daily Mail Online. You can't enforce that sort of thing. You don't have religion announced on your passport. I said myself, what we're going to do, stay there and, you know, eat a hot dog and sing glory, glory, hallelujah.
Your definition of true leadership is to propose something that's totally impractical.
No, my definition of true leadership is be able to stand up and say, we're not going to tolerate that.
And propose
okay, you
something
can go
that
to
you
the
admit
specifics.
cannot
You
be
can
implemented.
Of course, you can knock the specifics, but actually what he's
But
trying to do is
that was the specific. That was the one thing he proposed. And you've now admitting it could not be implemented, correct?
Andrew, he has got millions of supporters in the US.
That's not what I'm asking you.
His poll ratings have just risen. And I think if you ask the British public, there's a lot of people behind the kind of sentiment that Donald Trump is expressing, is that we will not tolerate being taken over by forces that make us fearful to live in our own country.
And his answer to that, a man who would be president and leader of the free world, is to propose something that even you, his greatest British supporter, admits is totally impractical.
I never claimed to be Trump's greatest British supporter.
No,
what I will do, you are calling me that, Andrew, and I will call you a number of names in return, but I'm better than that. So instead, I'm going to stand up for British people who do have some strength of agreement with Trump's sentiment, who are clicking on an alternative petition, Andrew, which the BBC aren't speaking about, which says they do not want any more immigration into the UK until we can control the fear we feel in our own towns and cities.
From what we know of British public opinion on this issue, the latest polls suggest about 2/3 of British people don't agree with Mr. Trump.
I still would say to you, Andrew, you know, yesterday I was quoting figures of 25% of British people stand very strongly behind him. So you're now giving me an extra percentage there. So a third of people stand strongly behind Trump, and I don't see that message.
No, that's not how polls work. 2/3 are against him. A smaller percentage don't know, and a smaller percentage are in favour of him. It's not 2/3, 1/3. That's not how polls work.
Just before the general election, your polls told us it was neck and neck, that absolutely we didn't know who was going to be in number 10.
Sorry, the BBC doesn't have polls, Katie Hopkins. I mean, I know you don't like us very much. BBC doesn't have polls. The one poll it did have actually got the election spot on the night. But let me ask you this.
No, I want to say something, Andrew, if I may.
You've
I would
said...
like to say something, if I may.
No, I want to ask you an important question of something that you've written. You've said that we've gone too far in regards to the Muslim population and, quote, we've lost control of vast swathes of our country. Where are these vast swathes?
There's plenty of places in the UK that other people will tell you. I can tell you, I would not walk through. I would not walk through. I don't think it's legally accurate to actually name certain areas. I think there's been some legal issues around that.
No, there's no legal issue. You can name areas. Tell us these vast swathes of our country where we have lost control.
And if you didn't talk so much, I might be able to, darling.
Well, just give me a name.
I do think if I was to walk through certain areas of our population where over 90% of people are Muslim, I wouldn't fare too well. And I think my friends in the Jewish communities have also found they've been spat at, they've been shouted at, they're intimidated. Sure. Some people would fear
That's
to
terrible
tread.
behaviour, but it's not losing control. So let me ask,
we have lost control.
Let me ask you one more time.
We have lost control, Andrew.
Give me one example of a vast swathe of country. Give me one example of a vast swathe of our country where we, the authorities, have lost control.
I know those places exist, Andrew. Later on, I'm going to my child's nativity play. And do you know what? I'm proud that my school has one because so many don't.
So,
these days, all we can have is multi-faith assemblies, and that's not something I'm proud
so
of
you
in my
can't,
country,
in other words,
Britain.
you can't tell me, and so you'll talk about your child's nativity play.
I welcome the Daily Politics to follow me as I go through some of the areas where I will be spat at, I will be shouted at, I will
We
be
can't
told,
follow
this is
you
a
unless you
Muslim
tell us
area.
where they are.
No, come with me, Andrew. I invite your camera crews to come with me and see who tells me to cover up my hair, cover up my face. I mean, I can see that might be an advantage.
I'm
welcoming you,
control.
Andrew. Join with me. I still think a large percentage of our population stand behind Donald Trump, and I don't think the BBC are giving that enough airtime.
Okay, Katie Hopkins, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
From Plymouth there. Are you not amazed at the way that Trump's remarks have had so much traction, just so much controversy in this country? I mean, I was in America when he made these remarks, and obviously it dominated there. But I came back here on Wednesday morning, and it was like I hadn't left America.
He has crossed the Atlantic, hasn't he? I mean, if you have any remote sympathies with what Katie Hopkins' position, not so much the detail and the practicality, which you rightly point out, you know, Mr. Trump couldn't deliver. You would say that she is... don't get started.
Because it's not the detail, it was the core proposal he made.
No, you had done that, though.
All right.
So you would say, well, what he's doing is he allows people to say, yes, I'm very, very worried about what's happening in some of our communities. Thank goodness someone has said so. But the problem that doesn't address, and it doesn't address it here, and it doesn't address it in the States, Andrew, as you'll know, I've just been over there, is your problem is what you've already got to deal with. Your problem is in the communities that you have, and to what extent de-radicalisation is succeeding or it isn't. And simply saying, I'm not going to let any more people in, as if you kind of weighed Muslims by the tonnage, that is not an answer. If you have a problem, then you have it in your communities now, and that's really where you need to be focusing. It is, as Katie Hopkins would say, a red herring to say that, oh, let's not let any more in. You've got to look at what's going on now.
But here is the broader context on both sides of the Atlantic. Just as Paris brought together what is a potentially toxic mix of terrorism and immigration, because some of those involved in Paris had come through as migrants into Western Europe, so the events in San Bernardino have brought together American citizenship, the Muslim community, and terrorism. Yeah. And it opens the door to things that we have just heard, not just Donald Trump, but Madame Le Pen topping the polls in the first round of the French regional elections.
Yeah, it's a toxic mix, and it is such a highly charged mix. It opens the door to all kinds of emotive arguments, which we've just heard, and a lot of people would have nodded along to the views that we've just heard. It doesn't mean that any of the policies that arise from that toxic mix, such as you've just been highlighting, banning Muslims from coming in, as Anne points out, there is a problem internally already. And how do you? And she said, how do you stop them? And she challenged the practicality of it. It's not
the man in San
strong.
Bernardino, I should just point out, was an American citizen.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
He wouldn't have been covered by the Trump exclusion order.
And it's not strong leadership to articulate those range of fears brought about by that toxic mix and then come up with a totally impractical headline-grabbing policy. That's easy, lazy leadership.
There is a challenge on populism. The Economist has written about it, and we've said this stands for everything we don't agree with. But there is a challenge for the political
everywhere.
class.
Yeah. The mainstream is in retreat.
In the passion of the way Katie Hopkins argues, that people will be thinking, oh, that says something that I feel. It does not really tell you anything to do about it that you can deliver. And that is that rather dangerous territory that I think a lot of politics is getting into.
Okay.
Stupid girl.